So welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining our 11th webinar within this ECE Data Science Distinguished Series. Before presenting our speaker today, let me briefly go over some logistics. If you have any questions, you can write them in the Q&A chat. And towards the end of the talk, we're going to select some of those to be answered by our speaker. During the talk, I also monitor the Q&A in case there's any pressing clarification question that makes sense to address in the middle of the talk. Otherwise, we're going to address most of those towards the end. The talk will also be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel for future access. That being said, it is my pleasure to present today Professor P.P. Vaidyanathan as our distinguished speaker for the Data Science Seminar. Professor Vaidyanathan received his bachelor's and master's degrees from the University of Calcutta and the PhD degree in ECE from UCSB in 1992. In 1993, he joined the DAVD department at Caltech as an assistant professor. A decade later, he became full professor, and he has been at Caltech ever since, celebrating 37 years at the institution, which is awesome. He currently holds the position of Kiyo and Aiko Tomiyasu Professor of Electrical Engineering at Caltech. PP is a world expert in multi-rate signal processing and the general theory of filter banks, and he has done multiple contributions to other areas of signal processing and data science. Some of Professor Vaidyanathan's recognitions include the F.E. Thurman Award of the American Society for Engineering Education, the IEEE CIS Society's Golden Jubilee Medal, the Northrop Grumman Prize for Excellence in Teaching at Caltech. He has also received plenty of recognitions within the IEEE SPS, Signal Processing Society, including the Technical Achievement Award, an Education Award, and the Society Award. And as an IEEE Technical Field Award, he received the Gustav Robert Kirchhoff Award in 2016. And last year, in 2019, he was elected to the US National Academy of Engineering. On a personal note, a few years ago, PP had a series of papers extending classical multi-rate signal processing theory to graphs. And that is where I got more familiar with his work. And sometimes I had like to hang out with him at conferences. I got to learn a lot from listening to him, and he's always very precise in his choice of words. That is something that always struck me as remarkable. So Pipi, thank you very much for joining us remotely. We're glad to have you here, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Santiago, for the very kind introduction. It's a pleasure and honor to be here giving this talk, Ramanujan and signal processing. First of all, Santiago, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, perfect.
Wonderful. Okay, so without further delay, let's get down to the discussion. Ramanujan. Okay, so Ramanujan was an Indian mathematician. Let me first tell you a little bit about Ramanujan, and then we will get technical. Okay, so that's the plan. All right, so Ramanujan was an Indian mathematician who was kind of self-educated, because during his time, he did not have much opportunity to formally educate himself. He grew up in a very poor family in a city called Kumbakonam in Tamil Nadu in India. And he had barely minimal education, but he had great passion for mathematics. So he learned a lot of mathematics by himself. And as he grew up, his genius was discovered by Professor Hardy in Cambridge. And Hardy invited him to come over to Cambridge, which Ramanujan did. So he spent 5 years working in Cambridge and became world famous after that. All his genius really came out during those 5 years, and he basically transformed the world of number theory, analytical number theory, with his contributions. So that was Ramanujan. And he became a fellow of the Royal Society, and he was only 32. Probably the youngest in their history. I have to check on that, but 32. He passed away when he was only 33. It's very, very sad. So whatever he could do in those 33 years, you can imagine if he had lived for 60, 70 years, how much more he would have done. Okay, so that's Ramanujan. And I'm putting this up because even though he was self-educated, he would go to the library and look for books. And this was one of his favorite books that he learned from. And this book did not teach really theorems and proofs properly. It simply had a listing of formulas like this. That is all the book had. And Ramanujan would sit and try to prove all these things all by himself. And this way he learned a lot. He would have his own proof of very complex things like this. So that was part of his self-education. And whenever he, later on, he started proving his own theorems. See, what you see here is called a slate. Older people in the audience, people like myself, the older generation would know what this is, but the younger generation may never have seen this. This is called a slate, where you write with a chalk pencil, like in the old blackboard days. So this is how Ramanujan proved all his results, and then recorded the results formally in a notebook. Because of lack of enough paper and pencil, he recorded only the results, but never the proofs. So that is how he did things. For example, he would record his results like this. His own handwriting you are seeing right now. And because many of the things that he recorded were very complicated, but proofs could not be found, 100 years worth of effort has gone on into this. Many people have actually embarked upon proving these things. Many people successfully proved many of those. Almost everything he said turned out to be correct. And many mathematicians got their tenure just by proving some of these results and so forth. Quite an amazing history. And the young one you see in this picture is Ramanujan, and the senior person is Hardy. Clearly, he looks very, very handsome. And the reason why he's looking so handsome in this is because this is from a movie. This is not the real Ramanujan. This is the movie Ramanujan. And here is the movie. The title of the movie is The Man Who Knew Infinity. Actually, there was a book like that. There was a biography of Ramanujan with the same title. And that was the basis for this movie. I strongly recommend watching this movie. Not now, but after my talk. Okay, highly recommended. This is a great, very touching movie to watch. Okay, with that, what am I going to do in this talk? I will tell you something about Ramanujan sum. I came across this through sheerly an accidental thing, and I was fascinated. If I have time, I will tell you how I came across this. I probably won't have time, but if I do, I will, or you can ask me in the end. And I found that it is very useful to represent periodic signals, signals with the integer period, okay, a discrete time. And from Ramanujan sums, I introduced something called Ramanujan subspaces, because the Ramanujan sum itself was not sufficient to represent periodic signals satisfactorily. So I will tell you about the subspaces. And then I will construct so-called Ramanujan dictionaries for sparse representation of signals that have periodicities. Okay, and from dictionaries, it's one step to go to filter banks. Santiago mentioned that I like filter banks. Indeed, I like filter banks. I'll show you something in the end if I have time. I will also talk about iMusic if there is time towards the end. The so-called music algorithm in DOA estimation, there is an integer period version of this. I will talk about it if there is time. Okay. All right. So talking about periodic signals. When I say signal, I mean discrete time signals. Okay. We say it's periodic if this equation is satisfied for all n. N is the time index. Okay. If this is true for some integer p, then we say p is a period as long as p is the smallest such integer, right? Standard definition from textbooks. Okay. And this is the DFT representation of a signal of finite duration, size n. And if you look at the DFT kernel there, the exponential there, you will find that this exponential does not represent all the periods less than capital N, unfortunately. For example, if n is 6, these are the distinct exponentials that you see. Out of those 6, only 4 periods are represented, namely 1, 2, 3, and 6. So the DFT is not complete in representing integer periods. Even though DFT is a basis, invertible basis and whatnot, basis and therefore invertible transform and whatnot, it has this issue. For example, period 4 and 5 are missing in the representation. Similarly, if you go to something bigger like this, n is 32. You look at all the divisors of 32. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. It turns out that only those divisors are represented, meaning only integer periods that are divisors of 32 are represented. So more generally, for n point DFT, only the divisors of n periods equal to those divisors are present in the representation. So the Ramanujan sum representation is like this, as you see in the bottom, like this, where CQ is called the Ramanujan sum. And the Ramanujan sum CQ has period Q. And if I have a signal of duration n, then C1, C2, C3 up to Cn, they are all present, and therefore all periods from 1 through n are present in the representation. Unlike DFT, where only those periods are present which are divisors of n, capital N being the duration. Okay, so to give an example how this affects the DFT representation, take a toy signal like this. It is EJ something. I cannot read it because it is blocking in my screen. I'm sure you have not been blocked. Okay, but this thing, I plot the real part of a complex exponential. Okay, so if you look at the DFT of this, there we go. 32-point DFT is beautiful, sharp, and what is it called? Sparse. Now, if I slightly increase the period from 8 to 9, as you see on the right-hand side, then immediately the DFT does this. The 32-point DFT suddenly becomes not sparse. So the DFT is therefore very sensitive to the length versus period combination is very important. Period length 32 DFT does not work well for period 9 signals in that sense. Here is another example. Okay, again, same thing, period 8 versus period 9. Period 8, you see a sparse representation. Period 9, you don't. Okay, these are some consequences. Now, I just want to mention that between line spectrum estimation and estimating the periods, there's a slight relation, slight difference also. Even though ideally a periodic signal is a line spectrum, first of all, in practice, it's truncated, so it's a smeared line spectrum. More importantly, it is a harmonic structure, meaning there is fundamental, there are a lot of harmonics. So we are not so much interested in finding all the harmonic locations because we know where they are. Most important is the fundamental, but the harmonics help in identifying the fundamental more accurately when there is noise, right? Okay. So don't discard it as, oh, one more line spectrum problem. No. Period estimation has some details that are very special to it. Okay. So there are sophisticated things like H music, which stands for harmonic music. HMP, which means harmonic matching pursuit and whatnot. People have already developed before me, before this talk, long ago. Other people have developed that work well for periodic signals. But we will see Ramanujan method that I'm going to describe brings its own advantages. Okay. Before I start, let me also tell you what so-called hidden periods are. Okay. Look at this signal. It does not even look periodic, right? The duration is only 48 or something. It does not even look periodic. But it turns out it is made of two components. You add these two components, okay? These are both periodic. Period, what is it? 16 and 12, okay? Those are the periods. The LCM of 16 and 12 happens to be 48, and the signal duration itself is close to 50, so you don't see the periodicity of 48, okay? But the hidden periods, the hidden components, you can clearly see a period, right? So if I want to identify the periods, hidden periods, 16 and 12, there are ways to do it. In principle, you can do it with the DFT. It doesn't work very well if the total data length is very short, like here. But the Ramanujan method will work well, as we will see later, okay? All right. With that, okay, I don't have to really go through this. All of you know the importance of period estimation. So here is just an advertisement which says why this talk is important, okay? I don't need to go over this, okay? Now, I will tell you what Ramanujan sums up. It was defined in 1918, more than 100 years ago, 102 years ago by Ramanujan. And I put it up here in modern notation. Ramanujan used cosines. I use EJ, and it turns out to be the same thing. Okay, this notation you see here, KQ in brackets, that KQ in brackets is the GCD of K and Q. So when the GCD is 1, K and Q are co-prime. Therefore, the summation here goes only over all co-prime integers from 1 through Q. Okay, so this thing looks like the usual DFT kernel, the root of unity, the Qth root of unity. N is just time domain, time index. K is just like the DFT index, you can think of it, but only the co-prime frequencies, co-prime with respect to Q. So if I add those, we get a sequence in time, right? That is called the Ramanujan sum. Okay, and it turns out that this is a periodic signal, period Q. When I say period Q, I mean period is exactly Q. It's not a divisor of Q. This is important because if I add a bunch of signals with period Q, the result can have period Q or a divisor of Q. Okay. Sometimes the period could be an LCM of Q and so forth. All right. So LCM of the component periods and so forth. Sorry, that's what I meant. Okay, so in this case, it turns out that the period of all those terms is exactly Q, which requires proof. It's not an obvious thing. It's obvious that the sum has repetition interval Q, but the fact that it has period Q requires proof. Anyway, the point is that the number of terms is the number of integers co-prime to Q that are smaller than Q. That is called the Euler totient. So Euler totient is the number of integers that are less than or equal to Q, which are co-prime to Q. So the number of terms in the summation is the Euler totient. Okay. So here's an example. You can see C9. That's C9. And the DFT of C9 is like this. It is 0 everywhere except at co-prime frequencies. At the co-prime frequencies, it's a constant. And the constant is equal to Q. Q is 9 in this example. Okay. All right. So that is basically the Ramanujan sum. Obviously, Ramanujan being a genius, he did not use the signal processing kind of language, but that's more or less what it is. Okay. All right. Now, coming back, it turns out that even though this has complex things that are adding up, the Ramanujan sum is very beautiful. It is integer valued and it's a real integer valued. Here are examples. This also requires proof. Ramanujan proved it more than 100 years ago, and there is a totally different proof you'll find in a paper I wrote in 2014 in signal processing transactions. Okay, so the fact that it's integer is fascinating. There could be some applications when you implement filters and things that are like this. Okay, all right, and there is orthogonality like this. So if you sum over an interval that is the LCM of Q1 and Q2, then bingo, it's exactly 0. All right. So what did Ramanujan do with those? He did something very, very different that you and I would not be interested, but very briefly, he took things called arithmetic functions, number of divisors of n, sum of divisors of n, things like that, expanded those integer functions as infinite series involving the Ramanujan sum. See, that is Ramanujan sum on the right side. That's an infinite series. Those coefficients he found. See the coefficient 1 over Q square here, log Q over Q, all that stuff he was able to calculate, and a whole bunch of things like that. Okay. So he did all this in that one single paper, very densely written paper. He did all the things with proofs and everything. Okay, that's not our goal. Our goal here is to use the Ramanujan sum to represent periodic signals, to estimate periods, to estimate hidden integer periods and whatnot. Okay, that's our goal. All right. I will show you there are some advantages. The only time it doesn't work very well if the period is not an integer period. For example, you sample a continuous time signal, the result looks approximately periodic, not exactly integer periodic. In those situations, right now it doesn't work. We have to do something to make it work. Okay. Now, the fact that this representation, Ramanujan representation, can be useful for a periodic signal, that is itself not new. More than 10 years before I got into this, some people observed it. Here are some names: Planath, Mainradi, and Sugavaneswaran talked about it long ago. And only problem is that they, if I may say so, they did not do it right, unfortunately. So it didn't work very well. For example, supposing you take the cosine with period 6, represent it like this. The coefficient AK, those AK are these coefficients here. Indeed, you get sparse representation. So only C6 is involved in this case, coincidentally. But if I took 7, period 7, cosine with period 7, you get a horrible representation. It's anything but sparse in the Ramanujan sum representation, right? So that's what I meant. They didn't do it fully right. I will show you how to do it right. Okay, so there is a different way to do it where you can actually get sparse representations. You can do dictionaries. You can do all the modern signal processing tools to make it better and so forth, right? But first, some fundamental principles. Okay, so I'm saying it's not a good representation and putting a smiley face. The reason being, when something you find in the literature is not good, you get an opportunity to do some work, right? That's why I put a smiley face. Okay, now, what do we do about it now? I replace each Ramanujan sum with something with an entire subspace. So this is like an union of subspace approach, which is of course well known in our community, right? Okay, this is called the Ramanujan subspace. This leads to a beautiful representation, as we shall see. Okay, so let me first tell you what Ramanujan subspace is. Give me a second to sip some water. All right. So consider a space of signals of this form. Okay, AK are the coefficients generating the space. W is the DFTW. Okay, the W the qth root of unity. WQ is the qth root of unity. We sum over all k that are co-prime to Q. N is just time domain, time index. Okay, so the DFT W subscript Q, the DFT, the roots of unity, they form the basis. Okay, so this space generated like this is called the Ramanujan space Q. There is another way to generate it. What you do is you take the Ramanujan, the qth Ramanujan sum, consider all shifted versions of this. The first phi q shifted versions. Remember phi q is the Euler quotient. So the number of terms here is exactly phi q, right? So the set of all signals generated like this by varying beta L over all possible values. Similarly, by varying AK over all possible values, that space is called the Ramanujan subspace. Okay. All right. And because there are phi q terms here, the dimension of the space is exactly phi q. Or you go here, because the number of k that is co-prime to q is phi of q, that also shows the dimension of the space is the Euler quotient function. Okay, so that is what the Ramanujan subspace is. Okay, so right now you can think of it as infinite dimensional sequences. Therefore, these are not L2 sequences. But because these have period q, if you like, you can keep one period and talk about that. Okay, all right. But the dimension of the space, meaning the number of linearly independent things in that space, is only phi q. All right. So there is a better way to look at it. If you are not fully sure what I'm talking about yet, I will show you one more way to talk about it. But let me first show you very simple. So this is the 9th Ramanujan sum C9. It's DFT. Okay. As I mentioned before, the DFT is 0 everywhere except at the co-prime frequencies where it's a constant, right? So this is the Ramanujan sum, which itself belongs in the Ramanujan subspace. Now, any signal in the Ramanujan subspace looks like this, meaning it is 0 at all those frequencies that are not co-prime frequencies. And at the co-prime frequencies, it can have any value. So that's the difference between Ramanujan sum and the signals in the Ramanujan subspace. Therefore, the Ramanujan sum belongs in the Ramanujan subspace. But the Ramanujan subspace has a lot more stuff than Ramanujan sum. That stuff is basically the set of things whose DFT is 0 at the not co-prime frequencies and arbitrary at the co-prime frequencies. So that is the Ramanujan subspace. Okay, yet another way to look at it. You take our good old friend, the DFT matrix, Q by Q DFT matrix. Okay, Q by Q DFT matrix, and then pick those columns that are co-prime to Q. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8. 3 is not there. 3 is not co-prime. Take those guys. Consider their linear combination, meaning the space, subspace spanned by those guys. That is the qth Ramanujan subspace. That's what it is. Okay. Now, what do we do with it? Why is it so good? Okay. That's the next. So this is the Ramanujan sum. That's the Ramanujan subspace. Yeah, if I add all those dark columns, the answer is Ramanujan sum. And what you see here is one period. And if you repeat that periodically, that is the original Ramanujan sum, which has infinite duration. Okay. And because it's periodic anyway, I will often get away by showing only one period. I will not keep mentioning that it's infinite duration. Okay. All right. Periodicity theorems. What can we do with the Ramanujan space, right? First of all the non-zero signals in the Ramanujan space have period exactly q. They cannot be smaller than q. Okay. And any period p signal for arbitrary integer p, can be represented like a summation of signals that belong to Ramanujan subspaces of dimensions that are divisors of p. Meaning, you given an integer p, you look at all the divisors of p. Okay. If p is 10, the divisors are 1, 2, 5, and 10, right? Okay. Take the divisors. And go to those Ramanujan subspaces with subscript equal to the divisors. This signal belongs to such subspace. So the period 10 signal can be written as a sum of period 1 signal, period 2 signal, period 5 signal, period 10 signal belonging to Ramanujan subspace. That's what it is. Okay. Remember, the Ramanujan subspace SQ does not contain all period Q signals. Don't make that mistake. It's not true. S10 has signals that have period 10 exactly. But not all period 10 signal may belong in S10. In that sense, Ramanujan subspace is not complete in that sense. The reason being, the set of all period 10 signals is not even a subspace. That can be shown. Okay. The set of periodic signals is not a subspace. Set of periodic signals with a specific period is not even a subspace. But the Ramanujan subspace is a subspace, therefore it does not contain all the period Q signals. Okay, so that's just a small point. Anyway, coming back, very important thing. Suppose you consider this summation where these signals belong to the Ramanujan subspace. Then when you add them, this sum, its period is exactly equal to the LCM of Q1, Q2 and so forth. Cannot be smaller. Reason I'm mentioning is, in general, if I add two arbitrary signals, we give this as homework problems, right? In our junior sophomore classes, right? Add two periodic signals. The period of the sum is either the LCM or it could be a smaller than the LCM. It could be a divisor of the LCM in general. Okay, but with Ramanujan subspace, you add two things that belong to two Ramanujan subspaces. The result period is exactly the LCM. It cannot be smaller. It cannot be a divisor. It's exactly the LCM. That's very unique and very important to identify periods unambiguously. Okay, this is a very important result. Okay, not that obvious. It requires proof. Okay, I will now tell you something called the Faraday dictionary. Okay, we did that a while ago. Okay, what it is this. Look, this comes from the DFT corresponding to 2 by 2 DFT. You take the non-trivial column of the 2 by 2 DFT and repeat it. And this is like 1 by 1 DFT, meaning just scalar. Okay, and this is 3 by 3 DFT. You take that column and repeat it periodically, right? Because W3 cube is just 1, right? So you repeat it periodically. And then this guy is W3 square and so forth, right? So these are like the coprime columns in the 3 by 3 DFT, but periodically repeated. These are the coprime columns 4 by 4 DFT, periodically repeated. Coprime columns 5 by 5 DFT, periodically repeated. Coprime columns 6 by 6 DFT, periodically repeated, right? This is called a Faraday dictionary because the sequence of integers underlying this comes from something called a Faraday series in number theory. It's a very classical thing. It was known many years ago, 50 or maybe 100 years ago. I don't know. It's a pretty old concept. Faraday series or Faraday sequence, they call it. Basically, we construct a dictionary based on the DFT. Remember, this is not just one DFT. This is a union of several DFTs. 2 by 2, 3 by 3, 4 by 4, right? Union of subspaces coming from DFT. So this is like a Ramanujan subspace corresponding to period 5. Ramanujan subspace, period 4. Ramanujan subspace, period 3, and so forth. But these are all truncated to some finite duration. Okay. So therefore, these are like Ramanujan subspaces, S1, S2, and so forth, except they are all truncated to finite duration because I want to represent finite duration signals, which may have hidden periods and so forth. Right? In practice, we are given only finite data. Especially, I am interested in finite duration signal where the duration is not that large. If the duration is very large, 10,000 points, DFT will work extremely well. Even duration 1,000 points, DFT will work very well. Therefore, pitch estimation and problems like that are, in these modern days, almost trivial. Nobody cares about them because even DFT works extremely well. Okay, or there are little more advanced methods, but they all work very well anyway, right? But short duration, only 100 samples, DFT doesn't work that well. 50 samples, DFT doesn't work that well. In those cases, it's very good to have a dictionary representation based on Ramanujan subspaces to represent periods. That's what I'm shooting for, okay? All right. Okay, so for subspace 4, the Euler quotient of 4 is 2, right? So we have dimension 2, as you can see. Subspace 5, the Euler quotient of 5 is 4, therefore, and so forth, right? Therefore, what I'm putting up here is something called a Faraday grid. What it is as follows. Look, take any DFT. For example, this is DFT 5, right? Look at the DFT grid. DFT 5 grid, it has 5 points, right? 5 frequencies, right? Take those 5 frequencies and take the DFT grid 6 frequencies. DFT grid 4 frequencies, DFT grid 3 frequencies. Take the union of all the DFT grids. That is the Farey frequency grid. Okay, it can be shown. It takes, you have to write a couple of lines. You will understand this. Take the union of all the DFCs up to 6 in this example, right? 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 6. That union can be shown to be exactly the index, the Farey series index. Okay, when you look at all the indices in the EJ 2 pi k over m, if you look at all the indices, you will find that's the Farey grid, Farey series, and that's why this is called the Farey grid. So if you don't want to make connection with Farey because it's too complex, don't worry. Just think of it as a union of DFT grids. As plain and simple as that. I have not done anything more sophisticated than that, to be honest. Right? I love DFT. I love DFT of all sizes. Therefore, I combine them all. That's all I have done. Okay. All right. So here is the Farey grid for various sizes. Notice that it's a non-uniform grid, but it is denser in some spaces, sparser in some spaces. Whether that's good or not, I don't know. But it works very well in terms of period estimation. That's the main point. Okay, good. Right. There is this very famous book by Hardy, same Hardy, who was the mentor for Ramanujan. Hardy and Wright, classic, 1938 classic on number theory, reprinted many, many times, including 2008. One of the most beautiful books on number theory. You should read it just for the joy of it. Okay. There is something called Ramanujan dictionary. It is same thing as Farey dictionary in principle. It does the same thing. Same idea, except what is going on here is that, again, this is the Ramanujan sum itself. Ramanujan sum 2. Ramanujan sum number 3. This is the cyclically shifted version. Ramanujan sum number 4, cyclically shifted version. Ramanujan sum 5, cyclically shifted versions. This will also span the same subspaces as the Farey dictionary. Okay, this dictionary, Farey dictionary. See, these subspaces are also S4, S5, and so forth. Okay. 2 options. So either you could have a complex basis, that's called Farey dictionary, or real integer basis, that's called Ramanujan dictionary. Whether having an advantage to putting integers there or not in the modern days, I don't think it's a big deal, because computational complexity itself is not a big deal anymore. In the old days, people would get excited because digital filters with integer coefficients very easy to implement. But today we don't implement them like that. It may not be a big deal, but I thought it's still beautiful to have this integer type of dictionaries to represent arbitrary, possibly complex periodic signals. Remember, complex periodic signals. Okay. Now, the total number of columns is that summation, capital phi, which is a sum of all the little phi. All the Euler torsions, you add them up. That's called capital phi. Okay, it can be shown. I didn't show it. It's there as old as Hardy and Wright. This thing is order of n square. Okay. So that this dictionary, therefore, if the number of rows is n, number of columns is order of n square. Okay. For example, the Singer dictionary, some of you may know the Singer array. Singer dictionary is like this, but this is totally different purpose. All right. Okay. So what do we do as far as periodic representation? This is what we do. Given a signal x, which is either a periodic signal, or it may not be periodic, but it may be a superposition of 2 or 3 hidden periods. So the goal is either to identify the period, or if it's not periodic, at least see if it is a sum of small number of integer periods. That's the goal. Okay. Suppose a signal has duration 50, it is a sum of 3 signals with periods. Then finding those 3 signals is itself interesting. That's the problem we are talking about. Okay, finding hidden periods. So the goal, so what is measured? X is measured. All right. A is the dictionary. A is fat, and therefore it's a dictionary in the modern sense. Tall things are, it's not interesting dictionaries, right? It's fat right now. Goal is to look for a sparse solution Y. Okay. And once you have found it, you can rewrite it in this form. For example, supposing Y has a non-zero coefficient corresponding to this column, then X3 is present here. A Ramanujan signal with period 3 is present. Suppose Y has a non-zero component from here with period corresponding to this period 5. then x5 is present here and so forth. So once I solve for the y using standard sparse recovery like L1 loss or whatever, right? Once I do this, I can find these Ramanujan components from here. And once I find, for example, suppose S3 and S5 are present. X of n is x3 plus x5. What does that mean? It means x of n is a superposition of a period 3 signal and a period 5 signal. Therefore, x of n itself has period 15, and x of n will not look periodic because there are only 6 samples in this example. It won't look periodic, but still you are able to identify those periods. This is kind of a degenerate example. Let's take 2 and 3. Suppose x of n has periodic components 2 and 3, then x2 and x3 will light up. Okay, so you can see that there are 3 cycles of period 2, 2 cycles of period 3, but the overall signal will have period 6, but there are only 6 samples, you don't see any periodicity. That's the beauty of this. You can find those hidden periods, even though signal may not look periodic. Got it? Okay, next. Example. Take this signal, synthetic signal. Okay, we made up this signal by simulation. Hidden periods 3, 7, and 11. There are 100 samples. The LCM of 3, 7, and 11, 3 times 7, 21 times 11, which is greater than 100. Therefore, you don't see any periodicity here. The period of this guy is the LCM of 3 times 7 times 11, larger than 100, right? Can we still extract 3, 7, and 11? With DFT, with some difficulty, we can do it, but it's not that clean, okay? So here is effect of trying to take the DFT. If we very carefully analyze this, we can eventually find that the periods are 3, 7, and 11. But this is based on the Ramanujan dictionary. There is something called a strength versus period plot you can get if you do the Ramanujan dictionary. When you get the plot, you will find that those 3 lollipops, lollipop at 3, lollipop at 7, lollipop at 11, represent those 3 periods. Everything else is 0 or nearly 0. There is a little bit of noise. I don't remember how much SNR we had, but everything else is not perfectly 0, but close to 0. So this is an example of how the Faraday dictionary, Ramanujan dictionary, those things work. All right, so that's the first simple example. So one more example, hidden period 7 and 10. DFT did not even work, so I didn't put it up. Ramanujan versus Faraday dictionary, they both work, as you can see. Main thing I want to point out, there is this extra lollipop at 2. Does it mean there is period 2? No. It's because of 10. See, there is 10 here, right? 2 is a divisor of 10. So anytime you have period 10, it does not make sense to say there is also period 2 separately, because 2 is a harmonic of 10. Therefore, whenever you get this kind of plots, you can ignore all the divisors from the plot and only keep the set of integers such that nothing is a divisor of anything else. Okay, that is how you identify all the hidden periods. Okay, like I said, it works very well when the periods are integers. Typical example being DNA and protein. In DNA molecules, which are a chain of nucleotides, you can call them bases. Bases are nucleotides, A, C, T, G, right? There is periodicity in DNA in the protein coding regions. In the protein coding regions, which are the genes, protein coding genes, there is an approximate periodicity of 3, for example. And if the DNA, if the gene region is not very long, it's very convenient to find those periodicities using this. Similarly, there are things called microsatellites in DNA molecules, which exhibit periodicity, integer periodicity. There also, it's very convenient to use the Ramanujan methods. And microsatellites are fairly short DNA segments, short segments of DNA. So whenever data length is short, this method works quite well compared to most other methods we tried. And multiple hidden periods especially can be found comfortably. Okay, that was very nice. Let me on the later side tell you a little more about Ramanujan. Okay. 5-minute break, tell you something more about Ramanujan. Many of you know it, especially the older ladies and gentlemen in the audience, people with me with white hair or no hair at all. You might already know this story, but the younger folk, younger generation may not know this. The famous story about taxi cab number, right? Ramanujan was in the hospital. He was having TB, suffering through TB. So Hardy, who was his mentor, went and visited him. Hardy took a taxi to go to the hospital, visited Ramanujan. Then, just to keep Ramanujan entertained, Hardy said, "Look here, Ramanujan, the taxi cab number was like this, 1729. What a boring number it is. What do you make of this, Ramanujan?" And Ramanujan says, "Hardy, that is not a boring number. That is one of the most fascinating numbers I have seen, because it is the smallest integer that can be written as a sum of two cubes in two different ways." Just like that, he came up with this smallest integer that can be written as a sum of two cubes in two different ways. So that was so special to Ramanujan. Hardy was absolutely dumbfounded. How on earth did you find it out so quickly? This is because Ramanujan was working on many of these things for a long time. The theory of partitions and so forth, right? That is one of the things he was famous for. So Ramanujan knew a great deal about this thing. So he just pulled it off like that. So that's a very famous legend about him. And if you don't believe it, I will show you the taxi cab. Here it is. Just kidding. This picture is from the movie. So please do watch the movie after the talk, okay? If there is one thing you do after watching my seminar, go and watch the movie. I'll be very happy. I have nothing to do with the movie. Okay, I just like the movie. I want you to watch it. Okay, next. Something called Ramanujan. Remember in the beginning, I told you, I showed you a slate where he would do all the work and then he would handwrite his results. Later on, people collected all those formulas into books like that, so that people can sit down and prove them. So these books, some of them just have formulas, some of them actually have proofs of those formulas and so forth. So Bruce Brent did a lot of pioneering work collecting all those formulas, bringing them into this gold mine of books. This is part 3, which means there must be part 1 and part 2, of course, right? And there is something called the Lost Notebook. When Ramanujan finally was in the deathbed, he went back to India, he was in the deathbed. Even the death to bed last year of his life, he was still working and producing a lot of work. That is how the Mach theta functions were invented by him. And all that work was collected by his wife, and she sent it to Hardy. And many years after that, it eventually came in the form of Ramanujan's Lost Notebook. So many people again started proving these things. So George Andrews and Bruce Brent were the editors of this, and here are those gentlemen. I met them a couple of years ago at the Royal Society. They were giving a talk to honor Ramanujan. I was giving a talk to honor Ramanujan. I met those gentlemen, these legends who made all the Ramanujan's formulas available to the world by publishing them. Okay, coming back to work. Okay, I have to do this work giving the seminar, right? So let me wrap up the seminar now. Okay, tracking periodicity as it changes. You see, sometimes these things could happen. You have a signal. Here you can see some periodicity, and then the period changes to something else. You and I don't see periodicity because there is noise, okay? So in practice, there is noise. In practice, the periodicity changes with time. So really, we need to get a time period plot, just like time frequency plot, we have to get a time period plot. Then you jump up and say, hey, why don't we do wavelets? Because that is what wavelets are well known for. Bad luck. Wavelets just don't work here. Short-term Fourier transform doesn't work very well. Wavelets doesn't work. It's not that anything is wrong with it. It's just not made for this. That is all. There is something else works. It's called Ramanujan filter banks. They work beautifully for these kind of problems. Okay. I'll show you the most primitive version of Ramanujan filter banks, which we came up with 4 or 5 years ago. And there are more sophisticated versions of this. Okay. I'll show you the simplest version to keep it simple. Okay, let me first show you the so-called time period plot. See that this is time domain. So in this locality, period 5, you can see very clearly. In this locality, you can see 7, 11, 14. The reason why you see 7 and 14 and 11, 7 is a divisor of 14. So you don't worry about 7 at all. Okay, you just think of 11 and 14 and 5. Okay, those are the periods. So you can actually do localization. Okay, all right. So you can see the correspondence between the plot and the time frequency, time period plane, right? Okay, good. So this is what the Ramanujan filter band looks like. So this is a Ramanujan filter period 1, period 2, and so forth. The qth thing has impulse response like this. It's a Ramanujan sum. You keep L periods. Each of them has period Q. You keep L repetitions. That's what I mean. Okay. Therefore, in the time domain, impulse response gets longer as the period gets longer, because impulse response is L times Q. Therefore, time domain localization is finer for smaller periods, which makes sense because a smaller period signal can be more localized than a larger period signal, right? Than a longer period signal. Therefore, the filter bank automatically adjusts the time domain localizability according to period. Okay, and these are all FIR right now. And the theorem is, suppose the filters, these filters produce non-zero output. In the absence of noise, presence of noise, we have to threshold it. How to find the threshold? These are usual problems that everybody faces, right? Okay, in the noise-free case at least, if these are the filters with non-zero outputs, you simply take the LCM of the indices of the filters. Theorem is that the LCM is exactly the period. Period cannot be smaller, right? For example, 3 and 2 light up, then the period is exactly 6. Okay, 3 and 6 light up, the period is 6, and so forth. 4 and 6 light up, then the periods are 4 and 6. Why? Because 4 is not a divisor of 6, and so forth, right? So there are ways of finding from here. And why I said this is not the most sophisticated way to do it is because this does not optimize it for noise, for example. If I knew something about noise, maybe there's a way to optimize it. This does not do all that, okay? It's a very primitive form of it, but it demonstrates the principle. This is what we used here, okay? All right. And it turns out, sorry for throwing it in front of you like this. It's a very complex formula. It can be shown that the Q at FIR Ramanujan can be written in this form, where alpha Q, where everything here is an integer. Alpha Q can be shown to be integers. QK are divisors and so forth, divisors of Q and so forth. Alpha Q has very, very simple form like this: zeros, ones, and minus 1. QK are the divisors of Q. Therefore, if you implement like this, implement FIR filters like this, it is computationally extremely attractive. But again, people like me who know a lot about filter design, they would immediately object, saying that there is pole zero cancellation. So we can do the usual tweaking of moving the poles inside and whatnot. But in spite of those dirty tricks, they still produce very beautiful, efficient structure to implement the FIR filters in an IIR fashion. Okay, so in practice, we move the poles inside. So those are all details of implementation. But this structure itself requires some number theory to prove. So I'm very proud of the proof that those Ramanujan filter bank filters can be implemented like this. T is absolutely beautiful. It has only 0, 1, and minus 1. No multiplications here, no multiplications here. Here you have to worry a little bit about the poles on the unit circle and move them a little bit inside. Ideally, the poles and zeros will cancel, but in practice they won't, right? Those are just details, okay? Any filter designer would play these kind of games as soon as it is possible to do so, right? Okay, all right. Quick example is protein molecules. This is a protein molecule, the Het-L protein. Okay, and proteins are chains of amino acids, just like DNA is chain of nucleotides, right? Okay, amino acids. Turns out that they also have periodicity, hidden periodicity of the amino acid molecules. This happens to have a strong period phi component. And don't worry about the insertion loops, strong period phi component. And there is a scale called the Kite-Doolittle scale. All it does, maps from amino acid to real numbers. Once you map amino acid number 1 is 5, amino acid number 2 is 3.8, that sort of stuff, you got a numerical sequence. And then you can do the Ramanujan filter bank on it, right? You got this. see a strong period 5 component here, right? And it doesn't work that well with DFT and things like that. That's why I put it up. And that when I say time domain, it's not time domain, it's amino acid domain, okay? All right, because it's a chain of amino acids, right? Okay, all right. So my past student, Dr. Thenathi, Srikanth Thenathi, he studied a lot of proteins like that, many different methods known to the molecular biology community. I can't even remember what the abbreviations are. I think this means wavelets. And RFP is Ramanujan filter bank. It works in all those cases that are listed. There are some other methods, some work and some don't work, kind of stuff. Okay. All right. And I will tell you about Srikanth Thenathi in the last. Okay. Very briefly, iMusic. What it is that many of you know what music spectrum is. For DOA estimation in array processing, we do music spectrum, right? And for periodic signals, because of the harmonicity structure, people have tried to modify music, H music, and so forth. But I have a totally different technique I will describe to you, okay? What it is that traditional music produces a spectrum like this, but this U is a so-called vector coming from the noise eigenvectors of the autocorrelation. And then you take these kind of so-called array manifold vectors, steering vectors, and you maximize, choose omega so that the denominator is minimized. And that is how you find the spectrum, so-called music spectrum. Instead of using the so-called array manifold vector, we have shown that if you use the vectors from the Ramanujan dictionary or the Faraday dictionary, replace that with the Ramanujan and Faraday atoms, you get a beautiful kind of pseudo spectrum. We call it the iMusic spectrum. It is perfect for identifying integer periods. Nothing else works so well for integer periods. So iMusic, if I put it this way, just one slide, it may look like very simple, but it's pretty sophisticated. It does, theoretically, it is not 100% as perfect as classical music, but still it works extremely well. Okay, I will show you example. That is a noisy signal, traditional pseudo spectrum of music. This is the Faraday iMusic, Ramanujan iMusic, or no, some natural basis iMusic. These things produce the hidden periods, 3, 10, and 13 beautifully. We should ignore the other peaks because they are divisors of 10. So this is 5, this is 2, ignore those. So this is what iMusic is all about, okay? Ongoing and future, it is possible to do denoising of periodic signals based on this. Finding non-integer periods using this method is still a nice, challenging problem. We are working on it. CNN stands for real CNN, convolutional neural networks. We found some connection with it when we try to make connection with machine learning. If I have time, I'll tell you. I probably don't have time. If there is a question, I will answer in response to that, okay? Two-dimensional case, it's possible to extend and so forth, okay? I have really no time to talk about this, so let me skip this. This is the website of the Ramanujan periodicity project that I have with my student, Srikanth Thenathi. He developed this. This is Srikanth. He graduated a couple of years ago. He's with Amazon Web Services, one of the smartest students that I have worked with, brilliant boy, very nice person to work with. It is because of him that all this was possible, because my work stopped after I talked about Ramanujan subspaces and Faraday dictionary. After that, he took it up and he really made it valuable, really made it work. So he gets all the credit for this talk, in fact. A lot of papers, okay, you can read all those. One last slide. This great man called, allow me again to take a sip of water. Hardy. When Hardy retired, he retired around 60, only 60 he was. He wrote a book called A Mathematician's Apology, 1940. In that book, he wrote, the real mathematics of the real mathematician is almost useless, he wrote. That means if it's real stuff, this guy is really good in mathematics. It does beautiful, original, honest mathematics. All such mathematics is useless, according to him, including his own mathematics, because he did real, beautiful mathematics. So he declared his own work also to be under the same category. Therefore, he says, A real mathematician has a clear conscience because he did not destroy the world in any way by inventing weapons of destructions. They just created useless, harmless mathematics. And Hardy also said that applied mathematics, engineering mathematics, which is you and I know it's very, very useful, right? According to him, all the applied mathematics, engineering mathematics is trivial. Can you believe it? Today, we have an applied mathematics department in every university, including Caltech and Rice, right? According to Hardy, all applied mathematics, it's trivial, right? You and I don't agree, obviously, right? Anyway, so Hardy, maybe he was in a mood of humor. He had retired. He wanted to be lighthearted. Maybe he meant it in a lighthearted way. Okay. Perhaps Hardy was wrong. You and I, in the information age, starting from the days of Shannon, look at all the beautiful mathematics in information theory, coding theory, finite fields and finite rings in fast Fourier transform. If Sid Barras is in the audience, he will appreciate it. Sid Barras and Ramesh Agarwal did beautiful, beautiful work based on number theory in the 80s, I think, 70s and 80s. Number theoretic transforms and things like that. Not only signal processing, beyond signal processing, acoustics. Manfred Schroeder did a lot of acoustical work, number theory based work. So not only number theory, number theory was Ramanujan's specialty, but even beyond number theory, right? For example, like Shannon's work, so much other analysis stuff. All the great stuff that's happening today that happened in the last 15, 20 years in compressive sensing, all that beautiful mathematics, asymptotic results and convergent guarantees and whatnot, that is something that you and I should be proud as engineers as well as mathematicians. As an engineer, we should be proud of the mathematical ability of our community in that sense, right? So not only all our colleagues in signal processing contributed so much to mathematics, they have contributed also to changing the world as engineers. So hats off to signal processing people and engineers. Thank you very much. That concludes my talk.
Thank you, Bibi, a lot for the talk, for the message in between, and for the closing message as well. I really enjoyed the talk, and I'm sure all the audience did as well. By the way, in your closing remarks, so Sid is indeed in the audience, so I'm sure Sydney.
Wow, I am honored.
Appreciate it very much.
What a honor. Yeah.
So you'll be talking with him later today.
Very good, very good.
Yes, so thanks a lot for this. Actually, a quick comment. So my parents, while I was doing my PhD, right, so my parents didn't understand exactly the things I was doing, but they knew I was doing things related with math. So they actually gave me as a gift the book of Ramanujan, the novel. So I read it through my PhD in Spanish. But yeah, so it was
good. Very good. That's so nice to know.
I haven't seen the movie though, but so I'm guessing me and a lot of in the audience would like to see the movie now.
It's fun to watch the movie.
So yeah, so let's go to some questions. We have some time, and also people we might run a few minutes later if people want to tune out, of course. So we have Suptik is asking. So you answered some of these towards the end, but maybe you can say a few additional words. So he has two questions. First, he thanks for the talk. He has two questions. In the change of period scenario in the real world, for example, an earthquake, the new period might not be an integer. What can we do in that case? And then as a follow-up to that one, he has, if we don't know in advance if the period is an integer or not, how would you suggest to use an algorithm like this one?
I see. Yeah, right now, this is still open to research in the sense we are still thinking about this. This is a very good question, by the way. So there may be ways to modify the dictionary to accommodate for non-integer periods. Only thing is a dictionary at the moment looks very large if we try to do it. So there are ways of overcoming it to some extent in that sense. Other than that, if there is a lot of data, you simply go back. If your problem admits a lot of data, you simply go back and do traditional methods. They will still work quite well. If you have relatively few number of samples, then there must be a way to modify Ramanujan. It is not yet ready. Right now, all we know is a patch-up solution, which is based on appending the dictionary with more atoms that represent non-integer periods. I am saying appending because the dictionary gets very large in that process. Unfortunately, right now it is not yet as solid as the integer case.
Mhm.
That is why I mentioned in the talk that is still in the works. Right now it is still in the works.
Perfect. There's also a follow-up question in terms of, is there any software implementations that are available, easy to use, if we want to implement some of these in some data that people might have?
Absolutely, absolutely. You see that website that I put up, I think I still have it here, right? We do have a lot of software available. I do encourage you guys to look it up. See this website here.
Mhm.
Yeah, all you have to do is go to my website, which you can find.
Right.
There is something called the Ramanujan Periodicity Project that's flashing somewhere in the top. Okay, if you go here, you will be guided. See the software there, right there? Yeah, these are very simple MATLAB codes. You can download it, it runs well. Try out the examples that we have in the website first, and then you can do your own examples.
That's great.
Very easy. Yeah.
In terms, so just a quick question here on logistics. So there are some people interested in the slides. Would you have your slides up maybe in your webpage, or maybe you want to send them to me and I can distribute it to people, or would you mind?
Yes, absolutely. I'll be very happy to email you the slides and you can share it. How about that?
That's perfect. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can send them to me. I'll make sure that people that are interested will get it. Yeah.
Very good. Very good.
Perfect. So here, okay. Yeah, so here, Ricardo, it's not a question, only a congratulations on your wonderful career. Best professor he had in Caltech back in the 80s. So as well as being part of his candidacy and PhD committees. So thank you, Ricardo, also for joining. Hopefully you guys can catch up at some point, maybe after this talk, there can be some email back and forth. It would be nice.
This is nice to know. Hello, Ricardo. It's great to have you in the audience.
So
I do remember you many years ago in the 80s, correct? Was it in the 80s?
So there, Ricardo, you can unmute yourself now if you wanna.
Yeah, I would love to see you. See, I let you see me, right? So you have to let me see you too.
I was very young at that time. Yeah, I'm turning 66 tomorrow.
Wow! Oh wow! Yeah, I see. Congratulations. Yeah, I am. Me too. I am turning 66 this year, not tomorrow, but this year. Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, very nice. It's very kind of you. It's really very touching to me to have somebody in the audience who was in my class more than 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Really
yeah, me too. It was very exciting to know you were going to give the talk. So I was really very enthusiastic about this. Thank you very much. And it was a very interesting talk.
Great to know.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Ricardo, also for joining.
Bye-bye. Yes. Bye.
So we have also, so some people in the audience are also interested in how you got into this area, right? So how you started working on this, yeah.
Very good. Thanks for asking, because that's an important question. Let me show you how I got into it. I like to tell the history. So I have a lot of slides in the end, which I keep for this kind of thing. Okay, so what happened was this. A friend of mine, about 10 years ago in India, he sends me a paper by his friend who was a mathematician. He says, hey, PP, look at this paper by my friend, and he would like your comment on it, because I didn't know that other gentleman. Okay, and it was a pure math paper on so-called, what is it, dual primes, okay, pair of primes. Okay, so I went through this. It was looking interesting, but I was personally not that much interested in that problem. So I was just scanning through the pages to see if there is something interesting for me there. I accidentally ran into a formula which happens to be the Ramanujan sum. I said, I didn't get much out of this paper because it's over my head. But at least this sum I understand, because I'm a signal processing guy. I understand cosines and sines. Okay. I grew up reading Sid Barras's books, so I know sines and cosines. I know much more than that from Sid's book, right? Okay. So I was fascinated, and in careful examination source, two things are co-prime in the summation. So I dug into it and then realized, oh my God, this is so useful to represent periods. So I took that one formula out of that paper, started working on it myself, and found out something more about it. And I spent almost a year working on it by myself. And then the student came, Shrikant came after that. He was fascinated by what I was doing. Then he took over. After that, I didn't have to do anything. And that professor in India, I will show you his picture. So this man, gentleman, his name is Bhaskar Ramamurthy. He is the director of the Indian Institute of Technology in Chennai, in Madras. He's a friend of mine, childhood friend of mine, meaning college friend of mine. We had PhD together, right? So he is the one who sent the paper to me without knowing what effect it's going to have on me. And that author of that paper, whom I never knew before, is this gentleman. His name is Dr. Gadier. He's a mathematician. Standing next to it is wife Padma Gadier. Now they are all friends. At that time, I didn't know them. Wonderful, wonderful people. It is that thing that triggered this entire idea in me. So that is a long answer to your short and innocent question.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah, you had already a very good answer prepared, so that was perfect. Thank you. So thank you for the question. So here we have another comment. Sudarshan is just thanking you for the talk as well. And given that we are 7 minutes over the hour, I think this is a good point to stop. Thank you, Pipi, for joining us. Thank you everyone for joining the talk as well.